Hello, I am presenting on gender inequality using the readings that we have on this strand. First, I'm going to present the summary of Gender Equality Still Knocking at the Class by D. Sacker. Sacker's article attributes subtle gender bias and a false sense of accomplishment to the continued existence of gender bias, and he goes on to outline 10 ways that gender bias is still present in schools. He notes that paths of study still tend to be segregated, with still more boys taking math and science courses than girls, and English and foreign language. Public schools are instating single-sex classes, which I can relate to because that's something that we are trying out at my school next year with the 5th grade, with a 5th grade boys class and a 5th grade girls class. They're not gifted classes, but we're separating them by gender. 80% of school-age girls report sexual harassment. That's something that I also was able to relate to because I know in high school I had to report it a couple different times. Girls are dropping out of school oftentimes because of pregnancy, and you still see boys dropping out of school, but they more often return to school or return to get their GED, where girls who are dropping out are just staying out. We also are seeing that girls are tending to drop out of the gifted programs once they get to high school. Boys are also experiencing some gender inequity. They fall victim to negative stereotypes and for not being masculine enough. However, we do see that they're still called on more often in class. More girls are beginning to enroll in science classes, but once you take those high-stakes tests, we're still seeing the gender gap in performance. And then we have a new gender gap in technology, where far more boys are entering the information technology field than girls. Next, I'm going to present the summary of Gifted Girls 25 Years Later, Hopes Realized and New Challenges Found by S.M. Rice. Her article focuses on the perseverance of underachievement amongst gifted girls. Her article refers back to Anne-Marie Roper's findings and draws comparisons to gauge whether or not there's been progress with gifted girls. She notes that socialization and stereotyping are affecting progress that gifted girls could have been able to make over the years. Current statistics show that when compared to men, women continue to receive only a fraction of the patents granted. They write fewer books and research articles and compose and paint only a fraction of the works of art. So I thought that was an interesting quote that showed that there's still work to be done with the advancement of gifted girls. We're seeing that more women are entering and finishing college. However, there's still a huge gap between men and women in politics, science fields, and leadership roles. She argues that instead of focusing on where gains have been made, such as, we still don't see girls excelling in science fields or politics, we need to look more so at the increased number of choices for women. This is something that I related to kind of thinking about my own experience, where before teaching, I worked for the YMCA, and the YMCA, of course, has traditionally been a male-dominated organization. It now actually has more females employed than males. However, when you're looking at statistics, that's probably jobs in that field would be maybe considered humanitarian, which is still going to be one of those, I guess, female type fields. However, that's definitely a choice that maybe years ago a female would not have had, and particularly my role was to run sports programs, and that definitely was not something that you would see a lot of females involved in. So I think that could be one of those areas where there's gains there that we're not seeing because of the way that statistics are done. Gifted women at various stages in their lives echoed their desire for meaningful work that made a difference, as well as close relationships. I chose this quote to highlight because oftentimes the lack of advancement with gifted girls goes back to their role in the family. And what Rice found was that gifted girls equally felt that their work was as important as those close relationships and those family relationships. And so it was definitely a choice made on the woman's part to try to balance both, because both were equally important to her. Rice describes gifted women who were happy lifelong learners but chose to stay home and raise children. And then she also described a common trend in which gifted women almost feel pulled as a younger woman to still fulfill family obligations and don't really realize that sense of self as far as their work is concerned until they're a little bit older, around the age of 50, which I guess would typically be when, or historically be when, women no longer have to raise young children. She found that creatively gifted women found satisfaction in various creative tasks. Women decorate their homes, prepare meals, plan complicated schedules for their families, balance time between work and personal life, and stretch family budgets. So she describes that we see that men have more success in creative endeavors because they tend to find one thing and then follow through with it, whereas we see gifted women finding multiple ways to exercise that creativity, and that's why we don't see as much on paper statistic success for creatively gifted women. Rice is hopeful for advancement of gifted women as it's now more socially acceptable for men to take a more active role at home. And she cites that now sometimes men are staying home to raise children and take care of the house. We have yet to see talented women in top leadership roles or in larger numbers in many areas in mathematics, sciences, and the arts. And some of this may be due to balance, chance, and desire. So in her article, she talks about opportunity, but she also talks about, the actual desire of females. So some of the things that we're gauging by the advancement of gifted women is not always necessarily because we don't have the opportunity. Sometimes it does have to do with desire. She concludes the article with, educators and parents must help more talented girls and women realize their abilities and potential. So she's still driving home the point that as educators and parents, we need to be adamant and diligent about continuing to help talented and gifted girls and women try to fulfill their abilities and potential. So the first thing that I have for us with this strand is to do a little activity, and I created a tree map where I extracted the 4 basic themes from the Rice article. She talked about career advancement for women, fulfillment of those parallel priorities of relationships and career, sociological or stereotypical roadblocks that might be preventing gifted women from succeeding, and how we diversify our creativity. And I did a self-evaluation. She talked about more men kind of staying in one career and being able to see more success because they don't bounce around. And so I noticed that I fell to that problem as well, where I started off in one career and now have changed to a different career. And now my second career is in a more gender role type career of teaching. However, I am earning a higher degree, and so that shows that there's still some progress being made as far as a gifted female going somewhere. The parallel priorities I definitely could relate to in her article as well. Because of my focus on work and school and some self-fulfilling goals, I did bodybuilding for a few years. It's reduced the number of close relationships I've had, kind of showing that it's hard for me to focus on both simultaneously. In 2012, I actually tried to resurrect my career with the YMCA after about a 4-year hiatus. And within a few weeks of taking that position, I did find out that I was expecting. And so I immediately tried to get back into education, because I did feel that being a teacher would allow me to devote time to career and family equally. And I also could relate to the article where she said that some gifted women feel frustration when their family prevents them from working. And I often do feel that sense of imbalance or frustration if I'm trying to complete something for school or work and my son is pulling on me. Some stereotypical or sociological roadblocks that I've met is when I had a promotion with the YMCA, it was assumed that I had never played sports before, and so there was question about whether or not I should be selected for the position, and I was able to, confidently respond to my interviewer that actually I played soccer, basketball, softball, ran track, and played 4 years of varsity tennis, so he needn't worry about that. But he still had reservations of how fathers of sports participants would react to me as a female in that role. In 2008, I found it interesting that I was one of 5 people that needed to be laid off because of the economic crisis. We were all females, and we all were known for kind of questioning things or being direct, kind of those traits that are more stereotypically male. As far as my creativity, I consistently have kept complicated schedules in college and in high school and now, and I enjoy keeping them. I creatively write and do photography. However, I would never pursue that professionally. Cooking has also been a creative outlet for me, but again, I have no desire to keep a chef's hours. So that's just some examples of how I am diversifying my creativity, even though it's not going to produce creative success in the field. So now it's your turn to apply those 4 themes to your lives, to see if you can find any connections. And I would like you to, on the discussion board, to share just one example of something that lined up with some of Bryce's findings, and then respond to one other person. After that, I wanted to discuss us making the Rice commitment, which is to make sure that we're trying to help more girls realize their abilities and potential. So if you could answer one of the following questions: what are ways that we can do that as educators or parents? Or if you had a parent or educator help you realize your abilities or potential, how did they encourage it? And how can you draw from that experience to do the same for other girls? And again, after you answer the question, if you could respond to one other person, just so that we can kind of engage in a conversation about this topic, that would be great. And my last slide is just the references citing the 2 articles that we had to read for class. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing your responses on the discussion.